All right, everyone, welcome to the second part in the series of videos on the condition of nationalism in current year. In the previous video, I talked about the state of the quote-unquote leadership of this quote-unquote movement. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the fellowship. And what I mean by the fellowship is those of us who opine, those of us who have a presence on various platforms, but we haven't amassed a great deal of followers or influence, but we have a presence. And also those of us who haven't bothered to create any sort of online presence, any sort of presence in this sphere of dissidents or nationalists. But we simply share these values and would like to see them implemented and grow and thrive in a real world setting. And a question I would like to ask of the fellowship, given that I had previously talked about the leadership, but a question I'd like to ask those of us who would be followers is, are we worthy of a leader? Because one thing that I want to talk about, one thing that I've noticed, is this tendency amongst ourselves to be very distrustful, almost to a point of paranoia, about pretty much everyone. And it's gotten to the point where I wonder if if old Uncle Adolphus, if the Austrian painter was around, would he be considered a Fed? Would we consider him a Fed? Let's keep in mind that he was tasked by his military superiors to investigate and report on the goings-on of the German Workers' Party. That's how he got exposed to their ideas. He was sent there literally as a Fed to infiltrate. So I don't know how we would react to that being played out nowadays. Would we call him a Fed and smear him and throw shit at him? Would we be receptive and to his change of views? Would we be welcoming despite his past? Would Julius Evola be considered a grifter? I just wonder if we're getting a bit too paranoid and unforgiving of people's past. I've seen so many people who did some. Maybe they worked with the government in the past, or maybe they had blue pill normie opinions in the past, and they expressed them. Maybe they were a classical liberal, or worse, even a lefty, a full-on libtard. But they have had a change of heart. They've had a change of views, of worldviews, and they are constantly still under the microscope and distrusted. And look, a certain level of distrust is okay, but also at a certain point, we don't need to be paranoid. And we also have this paranoia about anyone who seems to have any modicum of success in the real world. They're grifters, they're shills, they're feds. This is very much like the crabs in the bucket mentality, that they all pull down the one crab that's trying to leave the bucket. And I've never liked this, and I don't like seeing this amongst the fellowship. Because if we maintain this, if we keep this up, this paranoia, this distrust, this he's a Fed, she's a shill, then no one is ever going to be good enough. And this means that we followers, we are turning into the nagging wife. We're turning into the girlfriend who's always shit testing her boyfriend, trying to find out if he's good enough. And guess what? Well, just like in the real world, no one's going to want to be with us. Just like no one wants to be with a nagging wife or a shit-testing girlfriend. So we really need to address this. We need to address and talk about this it's almost like a nasty paranoia now. It's getting a bit nasty. And I think it's impeding us a great deal. And, if we want to enact any sort of change, if we want any sort of power or influence, if we want to have any growth, well, things like this, impediments like this, don't really help. And look, we don't need that much. Studies have been done on this. To affect change, to get what you want, achieve power, change, have a revolution, whatever term you want to use, you only need 3.5% of the population. And I'm pretty confident that around the West, there are nationalist movements, there are people getting to that number. That if you put a referendum to the people and gave them a choice to choose between our views or global homo, I'm pretty sure we'd get certainly 3.5% of the population. And so in order to achieve this, though, even in our sphere and, little by little chip away at what's going on, we need to set aside childish idealism and get real. Okay? Uncle A negotiated with the tribe. He sat down with the tribe and struck deals with them and negotiated with them. Let's imagine that someone, a leadership figure, someone who could fulfill the role of a leader, a nationalist leader in America, in the UK, in France. Let's imagine that they negotiated with the tribe and rubbed shoulders with them, struck deals that benefited us, but there he is with his photo taken with members of the tribe and they're shaking hands. Would we respond negatively to that? Would we be so paranoid and so, such the nagging wife with such high standards for her husband that we wouldn't appreciate the fact that, okay, yeah, this is how the world is. This is the real world. You have to negotiate with unsavory characters. You have to strike deals at some stage or another. Would we respond positively to that or negatively? I'm not sure, and that's why I think we need to talk about this. This paranoia and this purity spiraling, you might say, it's getting a bit too much. And it could be a serious impediment. Okay, so let's move on to some other points I want to talk about. And it's connected to the paranoia and again, like the analogy with the nagging wife, the shit-testing girlfriend. We mustn't be overly emotional about these things. The black pill, white pill roller coaster. On Monday, someone is our guy because he said something based. And on Tuesday, he's a grifter because he didn't go far enough. Enough. Stop. We must be dispassionate about these things and understand that some people can only say so much. Some people can only do so much. Certain figures. Not everyone is a grifter. Not everyone is a gatekeeper. And the good news is, nowadays, it's becoming increasingly easier to tell who is a grifter, who is a gatekeeper. I mean, really, if you, at this point, are unable to explicitly stand up for the well-being of European peoples, white people, if you maneuver around that distract from it, deny that there's any problems being white people, any injustices being suffered by white people, then yeah, you can be legitimately called a grifter or a gatekeeper. So it's getting increasingly easier because I mean the pot is boiling so much, and it's just so easy to tell like who's who now, you know. But this emotional thinking, this black pill, white pill, grifter, fed, our guy, all this stuff is very gay, very hormonal behavior, and it needs to come to an end, guys. It's too emotional. Some days are going to be good. Most days are going to be bad. Some figures in the mainstream, in our sphere, are going to say or do some based things that might achieve a modicum of success or influence in the real world. Most figures in the mainstream especially will only be able to go so far, will only be able to say so many things, and we need to simply understand that and use it to our advantage. You know, if Fox News, Tucker Carlson, for example, is someone that your normie relatives respond to, it's a name they trust, well, yeah, use some of the base Tucker Carlson videos to get the conversation started. And then where Tucker Carlson stops, because for one reason or another he can't go any further, then that's where you can keep the conversation going with your views or someone more based their views. It's the same thing with like Jordan Peterson. You know, yeah, I've come to realize, and I actually kind of saw it rather early on. I even made a video years ago about how Jordan Peterson, you know, said some things and that weren't really okay. But did he help? Did he help especially young men with serious issues? Did he help them become better people? I think he probably did. So, like I mentioned in the first video, if my philosophy, if my creed is always what is good for my people, my home, and my family, well, Jordan Peterson served a good. Now, is he a gatekeeper? Definitely. Is he someone we should trust? Maybe not. Probably not. Like I said, some distrust is okay, especially when it comes to figures in the mainstream. But when a figure rises out of our ranks, I think we should be a bit more forgiving and not be so obsessed with black pill, white pill mentality, or our guy, or fed mentality. All this emotional thinking, all this paranoia stuff, it's got to stop. So, don't get too depressed on the bad days. Stop consuming misery porn. And if I may be so bold as to make a strong recommendation to other content creators, again that term, but stop making misery porn. What purpose does it serve? We know the world is fucked up. We know the situation we're in is dire. What does it serve to keep making content about that, to keep, posting black pill doomer misery content, videos, articles, whatever? Unless it has some sort of purpose to protect us from what's going on, or to alert us to something that's going on, where we could actually help someone who needs donations or whatever, okay. But if it's just look at this horrible thing that happened, stop looking at that stuff. And if you're someone who makes videos, who has an online presence, you should consider not sharing that stuff either. Not anymore. What's the point? Okay, now, leading on from sort of, like I said, hormonal behavior, we mustn't be nasty either and bitchy, especially as things get worse. We mustn't be the caricature that our enemies have drawn of us. And in the nationalist sphere, in the dissident sphere, in the white well-being sphere, I feel like there's two types of people. On the one hand, there are some of the wisest, most inspirational, knowledgeable, good-hearted people. And on the other hand, there are some very nasty, ankle-biting, ego-focused imps who truly play into that caricature that our enemies have drawn of us. They play into, I think it's Blair Cottrell who's been calling, I don't know if he coined the term himself, but I've heard him use it, Hollywood Nazism. It's the Hollywood Nazis, you know. Hollywood portrays the Germans of the Second World War as a certain way, or Hollywood portrays people who might say, hey, maybe they weren't the bad guys, as a certain way. Fat, skinheads, nasty, grumpy, hormonal, gay behavior. And there's quite a great many amongst the ranks of the fellowship who seem to play into this. And I think, and perhaps in their minds, this is them being authentic. It's them showing that they're not feds, they're not grifters, they're based. But really, how are you being based? How are you doing anything other than playing right into the hands of enemy propaganda? So that's something to keep in mind. You know, how does your behavior reflect your values? And, if you want to red pill normies and get people on our side and get to that 3.5% number where that's all you need to achieve change, to achieve what you want, to achieve power, well, how is being a nasty, ankle-biting, overweight, skinhead bastard, how is that going to win anyone over? So that's something to keep in mind. And by the way, it is possible to red pill the normies. It is possible to win people over. I'm living proof of that, as I will explain in a moment. But if there are people who say that it's impossible to red pill the normies, if they haven't woken up now, what's going to wake them up? I don't agree with that, but I understand why people are making that statement. Because logic and facts do seem to have fallen flat. They don't seem to work on everyone. And that's just something you have to accept. But where logic and facts don't work, for some normies, it is possible to win them over another way. And that is by embodying and manifesting the good, the beautiful, and the true. If we can't win them over with logic and facts and our arguments, then we will win them over with our enviable lifestyles, our health, our happiness in the face of all that's going on, our beauty, our goodness, our truth. And it is possible because it happened with me. In my, if you go back 10 years ago, I'm in my 20s, I was your typical liberal, college-educated, smug atheist, insufferable, and I had, my lefty views. But over time, the truth won me over. The people who shared dissident views, opposing views to the things that I was taught in college or the mainstream media, they had enviable lifestyles. I liked what I saw in them and in the way they lived their lives and in the things they aspired to. the standards they set for themselves. And also, it's very important that I was red pilled primarily because of love. Because I saw something, and I've seen it all my life. I've watched something I love be contaminated, polluted, spoiled, damaged, threatened. And I'm talking about Europe and the European peoples, wherever they are in the world, but especially on the European continent, the traditional European societies, the towns, the city squares, the architecture, the culture, the art, the food. I've seen it all come under threat, and I've seen it disappear and get replaced by something far, far, far worse that doesn't even come close to the quality of what was there before. And because I loved this thing, and I saw it being threatened and being damaged, I was more receptive to the messages from people in my family, people on the right, opposing voices that I would come across online or wherever, who eventually, put all together, red-pilled me, woke me up, made me who I am now. So with some people, you can't get them with facts and logic and cold-heartedness. And you certainly can't get them on your side by being nasty, by being the Hollywood caricature. But you can win them over with love, by tapping into love. We'll talk about the normie white people, and we'll talk even about the anti-whites. Because, let's be honest, we, white people in general, of all races, but, the white people in our circle, in our sphere, and the white people outside of it, the normie whites, and then all people in general, we're in pretty bad shape. We're all in pretty bad shape. And I still believe, though, that even the normie whites, maybe not the anti-white whites, but the normie whites, they have a love for their community. They have a love for their neighborhood. They have a love for their family. They have a love for their ancestors, maybe not going so far back, but their grandparents. And we need to tap into that. But if we are nasty, if we're the Hollywood caricature, if we're paranoid and distrusting, if we don't embody and manifest goodness, beauty, and truth, then of course it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to red pill the normies. What do you expect? So just keep that in mind. And, I said I was proof about that because it happened to me. And then I've red pilled people in real life. So I know it's possible. It takes a long time. It's not easy. But the number one way in which I have red pilled people, if I look back and really think about it, it was never, through one great debate, one great argument, one awesome take, or a great rhetorical flourish that convinced them. It was mostly just by being a good person, hanging out, and, living out my values, and being a living contrast to all of the grotesque, all of the base, and I mean that in the negative term, not based, all right? All of the nastiness, all of the global homo that we're surrounded by. And I'm not saying that I'm a great person or that I'm an expert at this. I mean, if you guys knew how often I failed to live up to the standards I set for myself, you'd probably turn off the video right now. Okay? But this is not, I don't really suffer this argument, because it's like, when the shit libs say to a Christian, well, you aren't perfect, so who are you to judge? Who are you to have standards, basically? No, I have standards. I set them for myself. I set them for the people, and I try to live up to them. Do I succeed every day? No, but I have them. And it's important to have them. So, let's continue talking about the normies, the anti-white whites who are amongst us. Because this isn't just about the fellowship, but it's about white people in general, European people in general. Because sometimes we think that we're innately great, that by nature of being European, we have certain characteristics and qualities that make us innately great. And I think that's true, but we have to talk about then the state of our brethren, which is not very good. The state of the people who are of our flesh and blood, our kin, and they hate us and they would happily kill us. That's not very good. So we'll talk about them and then we'll wrap up here. So many years ago, I did Millennial, and Millennial Woes and I talked about the hypothetical question of would you rather live in a town, a community with white Antifa or based blacks? And I answered no. I would rather live with white Antifa. Because the question is basically asking, do you want to live in a world where everyone thinks like you and agrees with you? And I don't. And I think that no matter what happens in the real world, even if we got everything we wanted, if we achieved power and changed society and defeated our enemies, there would definitely be disagreement amongst ourselves as to how we build our society. And that's good, that's fine. So the idea that I want everyone to agree with me and share my values or my opinions is not something I want. And furthermore, when we're talking about these white Antifa, the white normies, and especially the anti-white whites, we have to keep in mind that these white liberals, they've been taken in by a cult. I really believe this. We see this in the way that they act. They act in a cult-like way. They are emotionally and violently defensive of their cult. They are willing to turn on friends and family to defend their cult. For the sake of the cult, they will get very, very aggressive, very violent, very evil towards members of their own family who are trying to pull them out of it. Drinking the Kool-Aid, that term comes from a cult which literally drank poisoned beverages, killing themselves and their children and their loved ones in the name of the cult. So this isn't very far off. And I feel like we also must remember that going back to not being nasty, we mustn't be nasty as we try to navigate this fallen world, these hard times. We must keep in mind that the white normies and even the anti-white whites, who are still our kin, as much as it might hurt us, their behavior towards us, we must remember that they have been victimized by very sophisticated and constant propaganda. And it's almost like they have a bacterial infection in their brains, a mind-eating bacteria in their brains. And, I started this channel hoping to cure it. As I started this channel and made videos, I realized very early on that I was making videos, almost every single video, directed towards white normies, directed towards civnas, directed towards liberal white people, and even anti-white whites, trying to, wake them up, trying to get them to stop being so cultish, stop being so violently devoted to their liberalism, their anti-whiteism, start trying to see from another perspective. And like I said, is it possible? Yes. Is it easy? No. But let's not forget that, it wasn't very long ago that everyone was our guy. Everyone shared our views. We don't believe anything that is so radically different. We believe what pretty much every white person believed up until very, very recently, which is why I'm saying that the anti-white whites, the normie whites, they have a bacteria, an infection in their minds, and it's destroying them, and it's making them believe things that are absurd and damaging. But they're infected. And, they don't think for themselves. And we know this when they say things like, this is so easy to know. When an Englishman or a German, and I've had experiences in which both English people and Germans have said this, Italians have said this, England is a nation of immigrants. Germany is a nation of immigrants. Well, this is illustrative of the propaganda, the sophisticated, constant propaganda. It's illustrative of the mind bacteria eating away at them. Because to say that England or Germany is a nation of immigrants, that is straight out of the rhetoric of American politics. It's not even true of America to say that, but that's where that phrase comes from. And because America just, sort of spreads itself everywhere, and whatever happens in America, whatever's said in America, somehow becomes popularized everywhere else, because America just still exports itself. Well, then when you have English people and Germans saying an Americanism, an American phrase like that, it's just proof that that thought isn't their own. That statement isn't their own. They didn't come up with that. They've just been propagandized into thinking that and into saying that and into holding that opinion. So all this is to say that, we have to remember that they are under the influence of a bacteria, almost, if you want to put it that way. And, like I said, that means that a lot of our brethren are not in great shape. And, when people say that we need to have more white babies and make white families and all this stuff, I always say, more white people of low caliber, low quality is not the answer. We're in this world we're in, with this sophisticated propaganda, with these mind-eating bacteria, well, making more people who are going to be, who are going to succumb to that isn't good. So we need to really focus on the quality issue, the quality, not quantity. And like I said, we achieve quality by living out our values, by manifesting, embodying the good, the beautiful, and the true. And, when it comes to those anti-white whites, well, especially the ones who won't change, and that's just a sad reality, that no matter how good, how truthful, how beautiful, how loving we are towards them, they aren't going to change. And that is a hard reality to accept, but it is the reality. And in that case, there is a thing, there is such a thing as cruel to be kind. There is such a thing as tough love. And, if I had to defend myself or people I cared about from rabid anti-whites, well, I would consider it like a zombie apocalypse. And, if the zombies are coming for me, even if one of the zombies bites my brother and now he turns into a zombie and he comes after me, well, yeah, I guess I'd have to put him down in self-defense and in defense of the other people I care about. So that's how I view the situation regarding, white people, Europeans who are anti their own kind, who have been taken in by this cult of liberalism, Marxism, the false god of equality, who've been brainwashed into thinking that their race and their ancestors are the root of all evil, and anyone who is different from them is some sort of special creature that's worthy of their worship, basically. Those aren't their thoughts. That's just the mind bacteria. It's almost like a parasite, even directing them left, right, think this, think that. Their mind isn't their own anymore. But we do have to deal with them, and we do have to defend ourselves from them, even though they are of us. And it wouldn't be like the first time that there's been an intra-European conflict and intra-white people conflict. So in a way, it'd be like going back to old times. But I don't want this to happen, which is why I wanted to make this video about how we need to be our best selves. We need to present an attractive ideology, an attractive movement. We need to be worthy of a leader. We can't just, complain about the lack of leadership and then not be worthy of one because we're always nagging or we're always demanding perfection that can never be achieved. We need to be physically and mentally prepared for anything, good days, bad days. And I feel like we also need to start turning the networks that we have formed, the Telegram chats, the connections, the friendships that have been made in the online sphere, and start turning those into real networks of support. And some people have been doing this. I mentioned Blair Cottrell earlier. That's one name I could think of who's been focusing on this. And others are doing it too. But I've also noticed that, when I'm in other Telegram groups that are basically just like normies, they are so much more congenial with each other. They're so much more supportive and helpful. And they're helping each other get through these times. They're helping each other prepare for what could be coming, regarding all of this Great Reset stuff. Whereas in the dissident groups, it's all just ego and hot takes, backbiting. So I think we should be humble. Maybe we can learn something from the normies still, despite it all. Maybe they still have things that they could teach us. As far as being, just being nice, just being helpful. We talk about white well-being and wanting to, lift our people up to their full potential. But if all we do is bicker and care about our ego, how are we doing that? So yeah, that's what I wanted to say regarding the state of nationalism, the state of the online sphere of it, and the people who would be, the followers, you, me. Let's try and be our best selves. Let's try and live out our ideology. If we can't win people over with logic and arguments, just embody your values. Embody that Aryan ideal. Embody that. Become it. And then manifest it. Show it. Every day. That's something you can do in real life. It's something I try to do every day. You're not going to succeed every day. I don't succeed every day. Maybe you'll succeed more than I do. Good. But you got to start. You got to have that mentality. All right? So, take care, everyone. Talk to you later.